everyone, it's Bells. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the first monthly wrap-up I've done on my channel since February, I think. This is a long time. Why did I stop doing wrap-ups? Who knows? But this is September's monthly wrap-up, and that's kind of it. So let's bring on the books, my friends. The first one we're going to talk about is They Drown Our Daughters by Katrina Monroe. I gave this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It actually just made an appearance in my horror books for the zodiac signs, which was last week's video, which you can go and check out after this one. They Drown Our Daughters is a modern queer gothic set on Cape Disappointment, basically about mermaids. The Cape is haunted, and in this particular family, this family is dealing with a generational curse. They drown our daughters, right? So moms are constantly like drowning themselves in the ocean, like throughout their entire ancestral lineage. So our main character is having an issue with her wife. She moves back to Cape Disappointment with her own daughter and has to unravel the curse. This book's atmosphere was flippin' gorgeous. Like, I can't even express how unsettling and atmospheric it was. Like, that's definitely where this book shines. So if you're like an atmosphere person and you like your gothics in that way, then you should absolutely check this out. This is basically about generational trauma. It's a story about expectations and love and hope, and it's very dismal. It's just dreary in every way, and it's very, very dark. I know at this point I probably should, but I don't always expect books to like go to the darkest places immediately. But within the first third of this book, some really dark shit has happened, and I just did not expect it to go that far that fast. And it was just like thoroughly sad and kind of upsetting. The stakes were high the whole time. It gets 4 stars, it doesn't get 5 stars because I found the writing to be a little bit clunky. Some of the dialogue was a little bit like, wah wah. And the ending wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my least favorite, but also like, I don't know where else it could have gone. It's just like a solid 4-star book for me. It was unsettling and enjoyable and gripping. I was immediately thrust into this situation. So if you're looking for a new gothic and you like mermaids and it's horror season, if that's your vibe, I highly recommend this one. I think it's just an absolutely solid book. Next was another very solid book, and that is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This is a very weird book. I don't know how to describe it. There's a group of girls in the early 1900s that get their hands on the story of Mary McLean, which was a bisexual woman's autobiography, and it's very scandalous, as I'm sure you understand. And so these girls start a little Mary McLean club and are found stung to death by wasps. A few more deaths happen at the school. They close the school down. So this is actually set 100 years in the future. Our 3 heroines, if you will, are part of a film crew who are filming the adaptation to a book that was based off of this incident. It's very sapphic, it's super gay, it's very gothic. The whole boarding school and the grounds are just a wonderful setup, and I think the actual story behind what happened was very satisfying. This is also a metafiction. If you've read House of Leaves, you know kind of what I mean, because it's a book about like a story, and also it's full of footnotes. So this author is like talking to us, the readers, directly, and it's very bizarre, and I really enjoyed it. I also found it incredibly pretentious, but like in the best way, and I don't know how else to describe that. There were points where I was so incredibly bored reading this book, I was like ready to stop, and then I was annoyed because it was so pretentious, and then I absolutely adored it, and then I was super unsettled, and then I loved it again. And like, the ending is super unsatisfactory, in my opinion, but like, it's unsatisfactory in a way where you're not mad that it's unsatisfactory because of the extent of this book. This book is 640 pages long. It's a hefty, expansive horror, and I really, really liked it. It's got a lot of like really high ideas that it's having a conversation about, and it will make you hate wasps. I see wasps now whenever I'm outside. I'm like, ugh, am I cursed? What's happening? Did I read this book and am I now cursed because I read this book? That's how it will make you feel. It'll make you feel kind of a little bit crazy, and like, I think that's a good thing. But do with that what you will. I really don't know how to describe this. I don't even know who I would recommend this to. But if you're willing to try something different and you're looking for like a horror that is long and feels epic, but also feels very current. Something that's going on in the horror genre right now is a lot of publishers just aren't buying long horror books. Most horror books are like 300 pages long because that's what sells. So when I find a current long horror book that's not like Stephen King from the 90s, I'm really excited about it. And so if you're looking for something kind of epic in that way, I think this fits the bill. It is weird, and I don't know if anyone else, like, it feels like a very niche book that a few people will like. I happen to be one of them, but like, try it out. I don't know. If you hate it, you can stop reading it. The next book I read, also a solid book. We're starting with my string of 4 stars. So I read Trickster Drift by Eden Robinson next. This is the second book in her Son of a Trickster trilogy. I read the first one and I believe I gave that one 3 stars. It was super exposition heavy. And let me tell you, all of that exposition frickin' paid off in this one. I blew through this book. All of the work that we had with Jared, who is the main character. Oh, I should explain what this is about. Jared is an Indigenous kid living with his alcoholic mom. His mom is also a witch, and he is also a magic user. He is the son of a trickster. And in the first book, he discovers that he has this magic and that he is the son of a trickster, and it's kind of his experience going through that. This book, he is now off to college from high school, so he is away from his mom, and he has to deal with the magic kind of by himself. These are very like weirdly slice of life books for them being so fantastical. Like, it's definitely magical realism in its finest form. And this book just freaking whizzed by me. I think it helped that we didn't have a lot of his mom to deal with. His mom is so irritating and she's such a bad influence on him. And like, I love Jared so much. Like, he is the reason that I picked up the second book, even though I didn't love the first one. And so watching his mom like do all these things to him and push him in this direction is just really frustrating. I also think all of that exposition setup just made it so we care so much about this character. We're just willing to watch him go through anything. It was just a well-paced read. It was dark and twisty and super weird. If you've read the first one, you know how absolutely bonkers this book is. I don't think you need to know anything about Indigenous traditions in order to enjoy this. I think it would just add like an extra layer on top of it. It's just a good romp. This one just really fit the bill for me, and I really liked it. And that is all. Next, I read A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers, which I have seen a bunch of people recommend. This was so good. Let me explain. This is a sci-fi where robots one day just woke up with full consciousness and were like, we don't really want to work for you humans anymore. Bye! And just left into the wilderness. So we are like hundreds of years after that. So far from that point of the robots disappearing that is believed to be a myth. This world that Becky Chambers has created is really lovely. I really like it. It's so focused on community and collectivism, and I think it's just so cute, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're following a T-Monk, Dex, who is a non-binary lead character. So if you are looking for books with non-binary lead characters, this is a good one to pick up. And they are a T-Monk. They're basically like therapists, but with tea, is the best way I can describe it without giving too much of it away. And they decide that they want to go off into the wilderness to see if they can find the sound of crickets. They go off into the wilderness, which is like a specific, like cordoned off, think like a barricaded national park kind of deal that nobody goes into. And they just go and explore the wilderness and run into a robot who is on their way to the human area section of the world, of the country. And so Dex and this robot just go on a little adventure together. Oh wow, I loved it so much. I read the whole thing and I just had a smile on my face the entire time. I've already forced my partner to read it. I'm currently forcing my mother to read it because I just think it was so heartwarming and so lovely, and the conversations that were being had about life and career, I just loved them all. And the robot, guys, I hate robots. I don't know how many times I've said that in these videos, but I have a thing against robots. I have a thing against AI. And this robot single-handedly made me want to change my mind about how I feel about robots. That is how adorable they are. It's so short, I like don't want to spoil anything, but it's just the most charming, sweet, still thought-provoking, but not in a way that feels like you have to prepare yourself to read it. You could just read this book. Like I want to buy it just so I can read it every few months and just like feel the expansiveness that I felt from this book. I just think it was so lovely and so well paced, and I'm so happy it's a series. It obviously got 5 stars from me. This is like such a perfect book. I can't even, yeah, go read it, please. Okay, next, I finally finished The Fiery Cross. Oh. So The Fiery Cross is the 5th book in the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, following Claire and Jamie as they gallivant through time and life and gigantic revolutionary periods in history. This is like a transition book between the events of the 4th book, which I'm not going to spoil for you if you read this series, and what is coming in the 6th book, which is the American Revolution. I gave this 2.5 stars. First off, this audiobook is 55 hours long. I believe the book is like 1,300 pages. And for how much freaking content I consumed, nothing happened in this book. There was not a single character arc. None of the events that happened had any lasting effect on any of the characters. Even like the big like climactic end of the book events. Nobody learned anything. Nothing changed. Everything stayed exactly the same. To illustrate just how ridiculous this is, let me just, 20% of this book, that is like 20% of 55, I don't know, I'm not in math. I listened to 11 hours of content, and we did not get past a single day of events in the book. We spent an entire quarter of this book on a single day that had barely any effect on the rest of the book. I can't even explain to you how frustrated I am giving this such a low rating. Because while I don't talk about these books a lot, I don't really recommend them widely because I have a couple of issues with how they present consent in relationships. And when I say a couple, I mean a lot. They're a guilty pleasure read for me. And I do genuinely enjoy Diana Gabaldon's writing. I think her description is really lovely. I think she's a great writer. Most of these books I've given like 4 stars or higher. Like, I genuinely enjoy them. So giving this 2.5 stars was hard for me to do because I spent this whole thing like wanting to like what was going on, and I just didn't. Nothing fucking happened. If you are reading this series, I genuinely believe you could read like the Spark Notes summary and just go into the next one and you will not have missed a single flippin' thing. Nothing happens in this fucking book. And like, things happen. Like, obviously it's not just them like wandering around a campfire for 1,300 pages, but that is what it feels like. It feels like she wrote this all like stream of consciousness style, and she was just like writing and was like, oh, and then this horrible thing could happen, blah 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 blah. Oh wow, yeah, this is so horrible. Wow, look at these characters trying to deal with this. I think I'm bored with how horrible this is. Okay, let's just make it better. And then it was just better. I just don't feel like this book was done with a lot of care. All of my comments are like, what else could this book possibly be about? What is going on? How are we gonna spend the next 30 hours? It was just bad. As it is with Diana Gabaldon, I'll probably wait another like 4 months before I pick up the next one. But I do think the next one is going to be really good because we are dealing with like them in the American Revolution. I think that's going to be satisfying. I just don't think this book was satisfying in any way. And if you are reading this series and you haven't dealt with this book yet, just like skip it. Honestly, read a summary. I really don't think you are missing anything. Like, genuinely. Then I read Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Weir. This was the 2nd book in the Locked Tomb trilogy. The first one was Gideon the Ninth, which I absolutely adored. I gave that one 4.5 stars. I gave this one 3 stars. This follows the events of Gideon the Ninth almost like right away. In this one, obviously, we're following Harrow Harknonagesimus, dealing with the Emperor and all of the other characters. It's just about necromancers in space. It's fun. The first one, I think, is really good, and I think it holds up as a standalone fantastically. When I say I don't know what happened throughout most of this book, I mean, like, I really don't know what happened throughout this book. Like, things happened, and there was a mystery to unravel, and we've got an unreliable narrator, so, like, that was kind of complex, and we're dealing with, like, multiple timelines, so, like, that was another layer of complexity, and I don't know what happened. Even when they, on the page, when they were telling me what was happening, I didn't understand. I feel like I should have been taking notes throughout this book. I like complex stories. I don't have an issue with that. I think I just read this at, like, I was just starting school again and like getting my headspace back into that, and I just was not looking for a book that I needed to like take notes while I was reading and not even know what I'm taking notes about, so just like taking general notes, I guess. I just didn't enjoy it. Also, Gideon is the only likable character in the first book. That's kind of the whole thing. Like, that's the freaking point. So what happens when you take the most likable character out of a story that's already complicated? There were no stakes. I didn't care about any of them. People started dying and I was like, meh, whatever. I wouldn't have even cared if Harrow died because like I don't like her. I empathize with her, but I don't like her. And I believe I said in my review of Gideon the Ninth, half the time I didn't know what was going on. And I agree with that still. Like, it's still written in that way, but the mystery was a lot more clear, and because our narrator wasn't unreliable and we weren't dealing with like multiple timeline skips, it was just like a linear story. It was sustainable to read. This was not. I didn't really enjoy reading this book at all. I just felt like it was missing the charm that Gideon brought to the first book. Do I recommend this? I don't know. I think it really depends on your headspace. I don't know if I'm gonna pick up the third one because this was not fun to read and it took a lot of time to read that I could have been reading things that I like thoroughly enjoyed a lot more. Like, I didn't get around to reading Ship of Magic because I spent so much time reading Harrow the Ninth. I feel very apathetic about this book. Yep, that's it. That's all I got. Okay, we're gonna talk about a couple of the audiobooks that I was reading during this time after I finished the Fiery Cross audiobook. So, Trust Exercise by Susan Choi. Probably one of the best written books I've read this year, for sure. Ever, very possibly. If Harrow the Ninth did not weave all of the different timelines together very well. Ooh. Sorry for the slight frame shift that I'm sure happened. Maintenance just showed up. Okay, we were talking about Trust Exercise. This book is about a relationship between two high schoolers that is manipulated by their acting teacher. It's all set in the 80s. It's about a lot more than that, but I can't tell you because that would ruin the book. This is a journey that you're gonna go on, and it is gonna be uncomfortable and really weird, and I really hope you love it. I was never confused about what was going on, unless that was like the express point, and you can tell in the writing that it was the express point. The characters were specific, the actions were specific, the environment was specific, like everything was so clear and crisp. The way the structure of this book and the format of this book just reminded me how much I love reading. Authors can be so flexible in how they decide to structure a story, and when they know what they're doing and they're able to like play with structure in a way that is fun and interesting and new, it's just so wonderful to experience, and I just think this book was so incredibly done. I gave it 4.75 stars. It should get 5 stars, and I'm like penalizing it for something that is literally a part of it. Very similar to My Dark Vanessa, where I just like could not in good conscience give it 5 stars because it made me so upset, so viscerally upset. This book did something similar with the description of the teenage sex going on. It is clearly written in a purposeful way, because we're seeing it from like an adult perspective, and this book is clearly about adult and minor relationships, specifically teachers, not romantic or sexual, but like the things that are required of you as an adult when interacting with children. So it doesn't get 5 stars because I just like can't. It just made me really uncomfortable, but I do think this was like one of the best things I've read actual writing wise in a very long time. It's like an exploration, like a character exploration. I don't know who I would recommend this to. I think if you like flexible structures in stories, if you enjoy non-linear stories, you'll probably like this a lot. And like unreliable narrators, if those are all things that you like in books, I would try this out. I was walking down the street because I was listening to this like in public, like gasping out loud and like cringing in person and laughing and like almost crying and like having a whole freaking emotional experience in public with this book. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I will talk about one more book, and then we'll go into the book that I read for school, and that's going to be the wrap up. So the last book that I read in September, I finished it in October, but like I read it in September, you know, was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So I needed something short and fun. I don't read a lot of rom-coms, so like I was looking for something just like silly, you know? And this was so good. I give it 4 stars. It was just a great romance. Our 2 main characters are in publishing, and the main character, what is her fucking name? Nora. So Nora's experience in relationships is that all of her boyfriends seem to leave her for like small town heroines, basically. So like her life is essentially the reflection of the Hallmark movie trope of like big city person goes to small town and decides to live there forever. So this is very much like commenting on tropes in romances, which I immediately hooked onto. I really liked that. This book is way more about Nora and her sister Libby's relationship than it is about her and Charlie. Basically what happens is Libby is pregnant with her like 3rd child, I think, and wants to spend some sister time in a small town. And so basically hijacks Nora from her life, plops her in a small town where she happens to run into her nemesis in publishing, Charlie Lastra. It's just genuinely really charming. The relationships were really realistic and I really liked it. I thought the banter was flirty and really fun and very sensual, like in a good way. For like a heterosexual romance, it didn't feel super like gender essentialist, you know? Like it wasn't like he's a big man and I love big men. She wasn't like small and little and like that was the whole thing. It's like she's a small girl, he's a big man, and we're gonna support these gender stereotypes. There wasn't any of that, which was really nice to see in a hetero romance. All of it felt really earned and satisfying. This will upend your expectation. It is way more about her relationship with Libby than it is with Charlie, but Charlie is like the through line of the piece, whereas her relationship with Libby is clearly like the important part of the story. And I really liked that too. It was just fun. Nora is a great main character. I resonated with her a lot as someone who also doesn't like small towns and is ambitious and likes working and like being in a city and being busy. I really resonated with that, and there's so many literary references in this book. If you are a little literary nerd like me, it's gonna be so much more satisfying to read when you're like, oh, I know exactly what they're talking about. It's just like that little extra bit of pretentiousness that I have was very satisfied by that. Not to say that if you don't get the references, you won't enjoy this. I think you will, but it just like pushed it that little extra bit for me. I just loved it. It was just freaking cute. I had read a different book by this author, by Emily Henry, Beach Read. I read that last year, I think, and like it was good. Like I liked the writing. I just didn't really connect with either of the characters. But in this, I absolutely connected with Nora, especially like if you are an older sister, you gotta read this book. Like I promise you will probably resonate with it. Solid 4 stars, solid romance. If you're looking for something like silly that still feels substantial, like I still felt like I experienced a good story, try it out. So the last book that we're going to talk about is the one book that I read for school this month for queer writing, was The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall. This was like one of the most well-known lesbian novels of the 20th century for decades. And we are following Stephen Gordon. We're basically following her through her life, through her experience as a lesbian, throughout different relationships, and just like how her life unfolded as a wealthy woman who happened to be a lesbian during this time. She winds up being a war hero. She is a writer, a best-selling writer. It's very reminiscent of the time, but it is also very radical for the time. This book was banned for obscenity when originally published. From an analytical perspective, there's a lot to talk about here. Obviously about sexual orientation and class dynamics. Class is a huge through line throughout this entire piece. Power dynamics for sure, and how that works with class. There's a lot to talk about there. From an enjoyment perspective, if this is a book that you don't need to read for class, you don't need to pull apart in every which way possible, maybe you're looking for an LGBTQ classic that you might enjoy, I was genuinely surprised at how good this was. I think it has some really progressive views on sexuality, especially for the time. It's very accessible for a classic. It doesn't feel long-winded. It's not particularly dense in the way that you think of classics as being. It is a very sad book. Like I was crying when it finished. But I think it's a good read, and I think if you're looking into the history of LGBTQ literature, this is absolutely a good one. I mean, obviously that's why I'm taking this class. There is something to be said about how in this time any queer relationship had to be presented in a traumatic light. Like, queer characters can't really be happy. And so of course that is unfortunately reflected in this as well. It's just part of the time period. But I think within those constraints, Radcliffe Hall really has a thorough conversation about what this sexual orientation looked like at the time. It's not just represented in like Stephen's wealthy upper class experience, it's also represented in another couple who is very poor. I actually really enjoyed reading it. Despite the fact that it was very sad, I really enjoyed it. And I think it says a lot about the time period that it is a part of. Those are the books I read for September. Go and check out my horror books for the Zodiac if you haven't already. Set yourself up for spooky season. Next week, we will be doing a week of my life as an English student vlog. So if that's something you're interested in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the little notification bell so you don't miss anything, and I will see you all very soon. Bye!